In the future, when people are being forced to relocate, do you mean when people are voluntarily relocating to 15-minute cities and not free to travel? Will the government simply leave us alone? Will we be able to travel freely and to leave the country with our private citizenship passports? Will you recommend getting other passports from other countries? What is your opinion on this? So what you're basically asking me, Gabrielle, is do I control police officers, border patrol, um, the FBI, the Navy, the Coast Guard? Do I control all these people? The answer is no. The answer is there something called private citizenship in place? Does that mean anything pertaining to your home that you live on? No. You've contracted your house right now currently as a legal description, joint tenant. You don't own your house, you don't own your property. And there's a lot of power that the county recorder, registrar per se, has over the land that you're trying to stay on. The people that are going to be quote unquote forced are going to be voluntarily leaving their land because they will be hungry, because there will be power outages, whatever the games that they are going to be playing, it will be done voluntarily. There's not going to be a forced thing. There'll be a perceived force in some cases, in some areas that they really have an interest in, but it'll still, the perceived force, what I mean by that, it's the same thing with the Jews. Even though somebody walks up to my house and says, you must leave right now, I have a gun in my hand, does not mean I have to leave right now because they have a gun in their hand. I have a gun too. And this is a common misconception when you see 5,000 Jews standing around a train terminal being led into Nazi camps with only 5 guys with guns. That's like 1,000 to 1. Is that voluntarily? Yes, 100%. Is that being done by a force? Not at all. Being done by force is 10 thugs on one family, all with guns and weapons, and pulling them into a van and taking them, locking them down, putting cuffs on them. And that's being done by force. I want this to be clear to people because there's a perception of force because somebody makes an edict, a presumption of authority, an order. You're not allowed to surf in the ocean because of COVID. We're shut down. Man, what a joke. Are you kidding me? Everybody that got in quote unquote trouble for surfing, for being out, for going to restaurants, for keeping the restaurants open, all have won their battles. The people that quit, gave up, and shut down are all the ones that lost their battles. It's a perception, it's a color of law of authority that you're speaking of. And so it's not by force for anybody. And I want that to be an absolute in your mind, because that's not self-governance. That's you're governed right here. You've been controlled right here for so long in your mind. You still believe that narrative that they can do these things. We can move people into 15-minute cities. Yeah, okay. Not in my watch, not in my home. I've got food, I've got shelter. They might try to do some wily stuff, and I've got hundreds of guys around here that will defend each other's homes against the wilies of the devil, or the wilies of the mafia, or the wilies of whatever. We have to come together, and this is a big issue. Why do you think it was 6 feet apart? Why do you think they did all these things? They didn't want the people together. So that kind of a question for me is like how much more can you piss a guy off than to have somebody, and this is nothing to you personally, but to have somebody even think like that still to this day. I get it. I understand it. But I am so far beyond that thought process now. The whole, yeah, and I get it. There's tyranny too. But how is your house recorded? How are you recorded in the heavens? I mean, are you protected? Are you protected by man's law? Are you protected by God's law? I mean, there's so many variables there. It's being a private citizen is one thing. Are you driving around riddled with debt? Do you still owe money on your house? Do you still have your house in a legal description registered in the county recorder? There's so many different variables. They have control over that house. They have control over, because they're the debtor and you're you're the debtor, they're the creditor. They have control over the decisions that you've made that God said don't do. And it's the people that said, where God said, come out, don't get into debt, don't be the surety for anything, get ready for difficult times, get ready to help people. It's those people that listened and obeyed that are going to make it right through this, no problem at all. It's the people that were looking at and understanding the elements of the Babylonian system, the mystery, if you will. That's the description of the whore, Babylon. It's that mystery that nobody knows, that you were all becoming employees of the United States, and therefore there's statute code, more or less called an employment manual, that you need to follow. It's a policy and procedural manual. That's, they literally, listen, if you don't believe this, the only lawful authority is the sheriff. Okay. Police are not a lawful authority. They're a policy enforcement officer. That's all they are. Do they have cuffs? Do they have guns? Do they take you out by enforcement or by force? Absolutely. But I'm going to tell you, I have seen more often than not somebody who is a private citizen have no issues with law enforcement on the side of the road after getting pulled over. They always trying to gain subject matter jurisdiction. They're always trying to gain entry. They're always based on your consent and your permission. You call for the officer on board, or the guy that's running the station, and say, this is what our people have done for years. I'm a private citizen. I'm not a public citizen. I'm able to travel freely without government ID, and I have a bonded, insured vehicle to do so, and it is unregistered. And when you have all this and you're holding the MSO to the car and you don't have an outstanding contract called driver's license in place, they can't withhold you from traveling. These are Supreme Court rulings. Does local law enforcement know this? Somewhat, yes. They will actually do the work that needs to be done after 18 years of being in law enforcement. But the reality is the majority of law enforcement don't. So this is why we teach people to understand that these are all trust, adhesion trust that we can control, and we can create the new agreement that outlines our position on this trust, because it's a single-sided signed agreement. Now, do we control the Chinese military invasion or the Korean military invasion? Do we control all these things? No, but you're going to be in a better position as a non-US citizen, non-surety, non-debtor than any other person in this nation will be in because of your status. I can guarantee that. And I can guarantee the Libra Code and trust and Supreme Court and treaty law supports you as a private citizen way more than it supports a corporate employee that's in dishonor, which is what a US citizen is. What's so funny, Tracy?